6, Cognitive Distortions, Part 1. So if you heard that Part 1, get pumped. We're going to have a few parts to this episode. So I'm not recording it all at once, but there's just several cognitive distortions. So I wanted to make sure I get to most of them. And there's probably going to be even more that I don't even mention. But I'm planning on doing 5 per episode. So I am pulling a lot of this stuff from Psych Central. It's just a psychology website. And it defines a distorted thought or a cognitive distortion as an exaggerated pattern of thought that's not based on facts. It consequently leads you to view things more negatively than they really are. So the reason I wanted to talk about cognitive distortions is because of two things. One, I learned about cognitive distortions when working with my first therapist and getting help for the very first time. And it was super helpful for me just to kind of view it at this lens. It definitely wasn't the end all be all of treatment for me, but it was helpful to get me started. And so this can be really good if you don't know where to start as far as your thoughts go, or if you're still not even aware that your thoughts are controlling your feelings and that they're even creating your reality. This is a really good place to start. Another reason I am talking about cognitive distortions is because my psychology teacher actually assigned us to do presentations, and this is my Spanish psychology class. And so we did presentations on different topics, and my group's particular topic was cognitive distortions. And according to her, this is like the most important thing you can do and learn about to start feeling better quickly. And so I wanted to address cognitive distortions here on the podcast because of that. Just a friendly reminder, I'm not a licensed therapist. I hope to be one eventually, but I am not. I speak primarily from personal experience and I do some research of my own, but please don't mistake me for a professional or use me as a replacement for traditional therapy. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about 5 cognitive distortions today. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is filtering. So mental filtering is draining and straining all positives in a situation and instead dwelling on its negatives. So this is super common. The example they give is it's performance review time at your company and your manager compliments your hard work several times. In the end, they make one improvement suggestion. You leave the meeting feeling miserable and dwell on that one suggestion all day long. So I think it's really important that they point out that there were several good things that your boss pointed out, but your brain latched on to the negative. I believe we can all relate to this, and that's what's so cool about these cognitive distortions is it's not just people with anxiety or just people with depression or just people with OCD. Like most people fall into these thought patterns at least occasionally. The example I have from my own life of filtering is I have hundreds of positive reviews from students that I work with. I'm an academic advisor, and I have so many positive reviews. But when I log in, if I see there's 10 new positive reviews and 1 negative review, I am not thinking at all about the positive reviews for the rest of the day. I'm only thinking about that negative review. And I think things that we do to make filtering even worse is really dwelling on that negative thing or trying to figure it out or trying to defend ourselves instead of just being willing to let it pass us by. So as far as combating filtering goes, I don't necessarily have huge tips for this other than being aware of it. Be aware that there are likely more positive things than you are seeing, and there's likely not as many negative things as your brain is focusing on. And so when your brain is leaning negative, just remind yourself, oh, I'm probably leaning a little negative right now. What good might there be in this situation? So the next cognitive distortion is polarization or all or nothing thinking. All or nothing. I talk about this all the time because it's a trap I fall into frequently. So polarized thinking is thinking about yourself and the world in an all or nothing way. When you engage in thoughts of black or white with no shades of gray, this type of cognitive distortion is leading you or is present. So the example that Psych Central gives of this is your coworker was a saint until she ate your sandwich. LOL. Now you cannot stand her, or you got a B on your last test. So you have failed at being a good student despite getting only A's before that. I like the second example much more. I like the first example. I'm like, yeah, that'd be kind of crazy if somebody ate your sandwich. Like, that's not a normal thing to do. So maybe I'm falling into the all or nothing trap. But yeah, I think I'd flip pretty quick if somebody just ate my lunch without my permission. Maybe that's a me problem. I don't know. But I really like the second example here. You got to be on your last test, so you have failed at being a good student despite getting only A's before that. I think that is a lot more relatable. The all or nothing that I deal with, the trap for me often comes with healthy habits. So like if I drink one Dr. Pepper, I have a tendency to think I've lost and I should just drink it every day. I know that sounds so ridiculous. It's like, obviously it's better to have one Dr. Pepper than to drink Dr. Pepper every day. And so that's the thing with a lot of these cognitive distortions is you don't have to do mental gymnastics to figure it out. Sometimes just recognizing it makes you go, you know what, you're right. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense that I'm thinking like that. Awesome. The next cognitive distortion, we are flying through these. Maybe I should have just done one episode, but we'll stick with it. So the next cognitive distortion is overgeneralization. Overgeneralization is when you take an isolated negative event and turn it into a never-ending pattern of loss and defeat. I think this is pretty similar to polarization, and there's a lot of overlap in all of these, so don't overthink that. It doesn't really matter which one it is. What we're trying to find out is like, where is your thought pattern skewing negative for no reason, really? So the example they give, let's see if I like this example better. You speak up at a team meeting and your suggestions are not included in the project. You leave the meeting thinking, I ruined my chances for a promotion. I never say the right thing. Okay, yeah, I can see that. The example I came up with for my life, I guess this is more of a broad world example that I am positive all of you have seen and maybe even participated in, but it's when people say like, if you voted for Trump or if you voted for Biden, then you are a bad person or you are a good person. So we take one piece of so-called evidence and come to conclusions about other people or about ourselves. So in the example the website gave, their feedback wasn't included for one project. And so they're like, well, I guess I don't have anything good to offer, which is not true. And logically, we can see that for our friends and for other people. But sometimes for ourselves, it's a little bit harder. I really like the broad world example for this one. It's an election year. Things are about to get feisty on the internet again. And I would just really encourage you to not make sweeping generalizations about people because of who they voted for. There is so much more nuance inside of people than that one basic thing. And so that's something that I am extremely passionate about, especially because not even within my family or within my marriage are our political leanings the same. And so if I make the sweeping generalization that everybody who votes for the person I'm not voting for is a bad person, then all of a sudden I'm hurting a lot of the relationships in my life. And so even if I don't agree, that does not automatically make someone else a bad person, nor does it make me a good person or morally superior because of who I choose to vote for. That's also a very negative thought pattern. So watch out for overgeneralization. Even just watch for it on the internet. People do it all the time. Like even in silly things like, oh, you like going to Disneyland as an adult? You must be a child in your real life, or you must be really immature, like you must this or this. And so you take one thing about a situation or a person and you make sweeping generalizations about them. That is this cognitive distortion. Okay, so our next cognitive distortion is discounting the positive. So discounting the positive is very similar to mental filtering. So the first one we talked about, the main difference is that you dismiss it as something of no value when you do think of positive aspects. So in when it comes to like my student reviews, I would look at the positive student reviews and say those don't matter. Only this one matters. Only the negative matters. The example the website gives is if someone compliments the way you look today, you think they're just being nice. If your boss tells you how comprehensive your report was, you discount it as something anyone else could do. If you do well in that job interview, you think it's because they didn't realize you're not that good. Oh, that's sad. I'm just not, maybe I don't think this way as much anymore because I read these and I'm like, oh my gosh. But yeah, that's very sad. Let's not think that way. Discounting the positive, I tend to do this in my marriage, but it has improved drastically. But the example I have is, say my husband does all these wonderful things for me, but forgets that I asked him to like unload the dishwasher, then all I used to be able to see was the dishwasher. And there's still some days where I get trapped in this negative thought pattern again, just like we all do. So it takes work to see the positive, but that doesn't mean that it isn't there. It's like very glaringly obvious when there's a negative thing because our brain sends up a flag. It's like, oh, danger. Like we didn't get this thing. That means we're being mistreated. That means we're in danger. And so all of a sudden, all the positive things are quickly discounted. And that's not fair. That's not fair to ourselves. That's not fair to our partners. That's not fair to our coworkers, our families. I think I also do this in regards to like my mental health journey. Again, it's gotten a lot better, but I used to have a bad day or a panic attack or a freak out, and I would discount all of the work I've done to get to the healthy state I am now and say like, well, I guess I'll always be like this. I guess this is just how it is. And it was really hard for my brain to count all of the positive or good days I'd had up until that point and not just throw them away. And so watch out for this one. It's not fun. Okay, I saved the best for last, the last of part one, I guess. This is the cognitive distortion that I was doing the most when I was having panic attacks. And so this was basically the thought pattern that my brain would follow that, in my opinion, would like cause a panic attack or lead me to a panic attack. And so this was one of the first things I worked on with my therapist was stopping this thought pattern. And that is catastrophizing. So, oh, there it is. I accidentally skipped one on the website, so I'll have to go back to that. But catastrophizing is related to jumping to conclusions. In this case, you jump to the worst possible conclusion in every scenario, no matter how improbable it is. And I'm going to add to that, no matter how irrelevant it is, especially for the present moment. So this cognitive distortion often comes with what if questions. What if he didn't call because he got into an accident? What if she hasn't arrived because she really didn't want to spend time with me? What if I help this person and they end up betraying or abandoning me? So the example they give, what if my alarm doesn't go off? What if I'm then late for the important meeting? What if I got fired after I've worked so hard for this job? So this is a thought pattern I still fall into. And it's also just extremely common when you have anxiety because it has to do with the future. And it's one of the most anxiety-inducing cognitive distortions. The example I have for myself is when I was struggling with relationship anxiety, I talked with my therapist about some of my fears, and she pointed out the catastrophizing I was doing. So I would tell her about a fight or a concern I had, and that may or may not have been valid. So I'm not saying that this fight or concern was imagined or wrong or anything like that. They might have been perfectly valid. They might have not been, but that's not the point with this particular cognitive distortion. But then what my brain would do and what I would say to her were things like, and then if we get married, because this is when I was dating my husband, and then if we get married and have kids and get divorced, that will be really hard. I don't think I can handle that. And so my therapist would kindly point out to me that I was catastrophizing because that all that could not possibly happen now. All that was like a problem right now was the current argument or the current disagreement. And so my brain would come to these conclusions that the worst was going to happen. What's scary about cognitive distortions, and maybe I shouldn't use the word scary because like you're going to be fine, I promise, is like we kind of create our reality. I shouldn't say kind of. I should be more confident than that and say we create our reality. And so when we think this way, often these things come true, and not in like a manifesting type way. Like there's actual things that we do to make these things happen. So for example, with my catastrophizing example, if I went into my marriage thinking we're going to get divorced, all of a sudden my brain is looking for flags or reasons to get divorced, because that's a fear. And so it's like all of those things are going to jump out at me more. And I could potentially create that reality for myself. Not that divorce is always a bad thing or the end all be all of bad things or anything like that, just pointing out how this can work. So same thing with like the all or nothing thinking. If we think that we have to do it all in order to be successful, our behavior often matches that, and we do it all or we do nothing. So we burn out or we don't try. And so our thoughts are very, very important. Something that my psychology teacher pointed out that I completely agree with is we don't always have to start with the thoughts. So it's not like you have to wake up in the morning and like think your way through the day. So you don't have to sit there and think like, okay, I'm filtering. So what am I going to do now that I'm filtering? Oh, there's some positive things, because then you're in your head, right? And that's not necessarily healthy either. But what we can do is we can start with behavior. And so often it's just helpful to just get moving. So the behavior can also affect our thoughts. So if we have this thought like I'm so unhealthy or something like that, and we get up and we start moving or we go on a walk or we go to the gym, oftentimes our thoughts kind of fix themselves, and we start to feel a little bit better, a little bit more positive. So don't discount the importance of your thoughts, but by no means either should you wait for your thoughts to be all the way fixed to start changing some of your behaviors, because both can follow each other. Doesn't necessarily have to be behavior first, thought second, or thought first, behavior second. But no matter what, working on either or both of those things is going to have an impact on your emotions. And so we could be feeling better. And we can also start moving closer to our goals. So I'm super excited for this series. You totally send this podcast to somebody so they can subscribe and, stay in touch for when I post parts 2 and 3. I will probably do it once a month for the next 2 months. So we should get parts 2 and 3 in June and in July. So keep an eye out for that. Hope you guys like the series. Let me know what cognitive distortions you're guilty of. We all are. So comment them if you're on YouTube, or leave a review and let me know which ones you're doing, or send me a message on Instagram. I'd love to hear from you. And you guys are so amazing. Have a great week. Bye-bye.